You are addicted to something, not in the way society defines addiction, not in a way you'd admit out loud, and not in a way that feels obvious, but it governs your confidence, your energy, your authority, and the way life responds to you. You are addicted to your appearance. And Carl Jung warned that the most dangerous addictions are not the ones we indulge in, but the ones we deny. Every morning, before your day truly begins, something happens. You look at yourself, sometimes briefly, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes with judgment, sometimes with avoidance, but always with consequence. Because the mirror is not passive. It does not simply reflect. It confirms, and whatever it confirms becomes a psychological command. Your nervous system obeys. For the rest of the day, Jung understood this long before modern neuroscience caught up. He knew that the human psyche is symbolic, and symbols shape reality. Your appearance is one of the most powerful symbols you carry, not because it defines your worth, but because your mind uses it to decide how much power you're allowed to feel. Most people believe addiction looks like excess, too much pleasure, too much obsession, too much craving. But Jung taught something far more unsettling. Addiction can also look like detachment, neglect, dismissal, especially when it comes wrapped in maturity. I don't care how I look anymore. That stuff doesn't matter at my age. I've outgrown vanity. Those sentences feel enlightened, but psychologically, they are often defenses. Because when something stops matching emotionally, but still controls how you feel, it hasn't lost power. It's gone underground. And whatever lives in the unconscious doesn't disappear. It governs. Jung called this the shadow, the part of you that still holds influence, but no longer receives attention. And appearance is one of the shadow's favorite hiding places, because it sits at the intersection of identity and visibility. How you see yourself, how others see you, and how much permission you give yourself to take up space. Think about this carefully. On days when you feel good about how you look, you speak differently, you move differently, you make decisions faster, you tolerate less disrespect. On days when your reflection disappoints you, you hesitate, you withdraw, you explain yourself more, you doubt your instincts. That's not coincidence. That's conditioning. Your psyche is constantly asking one silent question. Is this the person who is meant to lead today? And the mirror answers before you do. Jung believed the psyche seeks wholeness above all else. When your inner identity and outer image align, the system relaxes. But when they don't, the psyche experiences fragmentation. And fragmentation always produces anxiety. That's why neglecting your appearance doesn't free you from caring. It traps you in conflict, because you still feel the consequences without understanding the cause. That is addiction without awareness. And awareness is everything. Most people never consciously decide to abandon their appearance. It happens gradually, after disappointment, after heartbreak, after betrayal, after years of responsibility. The body becomes functional. The image becomes secondary. The mirror becomes something to rush past. And slowly, a subtle narrative forms. This is just how life is now. But Jung warned against confusing adaptation with surrender. He believed that when the persona, the image you present to the world, no longer reflects the self, energy leaks. Motivation dries up. Desire dulls. Vitality fades. Not because you're aging, but because you're misaligned. And misalignment is exhausting. This is why some people grow older and sharper, while others grow tired and invisible. The difference is not genetics. It's coherence. The coherent individual treats appearance not as decoration, but as communication, a dialogue between inner values and outer expression. The incoherent individual dismisses appearance and wonders why life feels muted. Let me ask you something honestly. When was the last time you looked at yourself and thought, yes, this matches who I am becoming? Not who you were, not who you wish you used to be, but who you are moving toward. If that moment feels distant or uncomfortable, that's not failure. That's information. Jung believed discomfort is the psyche's way of asking for integration, not punishment. not shame. Integration. Your appearance is not about impressing others. It's about maintaining psychological authority over yourself. Every time you neglect it, your unconscious learns something dangerous. This person doesn't enforce standards. And when standards collapse internally, the external world follows. People treat you according to the signals you emit, not consciously, energetically. Presence is felt before it is evaluated. This is why Jung never separated psychology from the body. He understood that consciousness must be housed in something respected. If the vessel is neglected, the mind contracts. Confidence becomes performative. Authority becomes forced. And self-belief becomes fragile. You might still succeed, but it costs more. More effort, more explanation, more exhaustion. That's the hidden tax of unconscious addiction. The addiction isn't to looking good. It's to the emotional relief you get when your appearance confirms your identity. And when that relief disappears, you either chase it obsessively or pretend it doesn't matter at all. Both are forms of dependency. Freedom comes only when you reclaim intentionality. Jung taught that maturity is not about abandoning form. It's about refining it. At 40, 50, 60, your appearance should not chase youth. It should express clarity, groundedness, self-possession, quiet authority. That kind of presence cannot be faked. It is cultivated, and cultivation begins with awareness. Right now, your mirror is already shaping your destiny. The only question is whether you're conscious of the role it plays. Because once you see the addiction, once you understand how deeply appearance is wired into confidence, decision-making, and self-trust, you can no longer unknow it. And Jung would say, that moment of recognition is the beginning of individuation. What most people never realize is that they are already addicted. Not addicted to substances, not addicted to validation in the obvious sense, but addicted to how they feel when they abandon themselves. And that is why changing your appearance feels so uncomfortable at first. Carl Jung understood this paradox deeply. He knew that the psyche does not simply cling to pleasure. It clings to familiar identity. Even when that identity causes suffering, the mind would rather remain loyal to a painful self-image than risk the uncertainty of becoming someone new. This is where the addiction truly lives. When you neglect your appearance, when you stop caring how you look, how you move, how you present yourself to the world, you are not being humble. You are feeding a psychological dependency, a dependency on invisibility, on lowering expectations, on staying small enough. That life cannot demand more from you. Neglect becomes a sedative, because if you never look powerful, no one expects you to act powerful. If you never look confident, no one asks you to lead. If you never look alive, no one challenges you to become more. Jung would say this is the shadow at work, but not the dramatic shadow people imagine. This is the comfortable shadow, the one that whispers, stay as you are. This is safer, and your appearance becomes the ritual through which that shadow is maintained. Every morning you rush past the mirror, without intention. Every time you throw on whatever is easiest. Every time you say, it doesn't matter. That is not neutrality. That is reinforcement. The psyche learns through repetition. And what you repeat, you become addicted to. There is a subtle reward system here. When you do not try, you cannot fail. When you do not elevate your image, you cannot be rejected for your greatness. When you remain visually invisible, you remain emotionally protected. Jung warned that the ego will sabotage growth not through pain, but through comfort. And nothing is more comfortable than a neglected self-image that keeps expectations low. But here is the truth that most people over 40 never confront. You are not addicted to how you look. You are addicted to not confronting who you could become if you looked aligned. Because the moment your appearance begins to reflect inner strength, discipline, and presence, something terrifying happens. Life responds. People look at you differently. Opportunities approach you differently. Responsibility finds you. And that is when the old identity panics. This is why so many people unconsciously sabotage their own transformation. They start taking care of themselves, then suddenly stop. They buy better clothes, then retreat back to the old ones. They improve their posture, their body, their presence, then dismiss it as not important. Jung would call this resistance a fear of individuation. Individuation is not just psychological growth. It is visibility. It is standing fully in your form. It is allowing the outer world to see the inner order that has been quietly forming inside you. And the psyche resists this because individuation demands responsibility. When your appearance reflects coherence, you can no longer lie to yourself. You can no longer say, "I'm not ready." You can no longer hide behind chaos. You can no longer pretend your life is smaller than it is meant to be. That is why neglect becomes addictive. It protects you from the moment when your reflection demands action. There is another layer to this addiction, one Jung hinted at but few speak about openly. Your appearance is a feedback loop to the unconscious. Every time you look disordered, your unconscious receives the message, "We are not in control." Every time you look tired, careless, fragmented, your psyche absorbs that as truth. And once the unconscious accepts that identity, it begins shaping your behavior to match it. You procrastinate more. You hesitate more. You lower your standards in relationships. You tolerate environments that drain you, not because you lack willpower, but because your image has trained your nervous system to expect less from life. And here is the most unsettling realization. Some people are not afraid of failing. They are afraid of succeeding while looking like someone who deserves it, because then there is no escape. Then the question becomes unavoidable. If I look like this, why am I still living like that? Jung believed that transformation always begins with a symbolic act, and your appearance is one of the most powerful symbols you control daily. When you intentionally shape your outer image, you disrupt the addiction to self-neglect. You introduce friction into the psyche. At first, it feels wrong, uncomfortable, even arrogant. That discomfort is withdrawal. Withdrawal from an old identity that was built around hiding. This is why many people confuse self-respect with ego, because when you have lived in self-denial for decades, dignity feels foreign. But Jung would say dignity is not inflation. It is alignment. And alignment is dangerous to the shadow, because when you align how you look with who you are becoming, the shadow loses its favorite hiding place. You can no longer disappear. You start walking differently, speaking differently, choosing differently, not because you are pretending, but because your nervous system is recalibrating. This is why appearance work is not cosmetic. It is neurological. It rewires the unconscious association between identity and possibility. The addiction begins to weaken the moment you decide that how you look is no longer negotiable. Not perfect, not dramatic, but intentional. And that is when something profound happens. The mirror stops being a place of avoidance. It becomes a checkpoint, a moment where the psyche asks, are we still telling the old story, or are we ready to live a new one? Most people never reach this moment because they never confront their addiction to self-minimization. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And from that point on, every neglected detail becomes a choice. Every careless decision becomes a signal. Every morning becomes a vote for either the old identity or the emerging one. Jung said that what you resist persists, and what you embody transforms you. Your appearance is not the cause of your power. It is the proof that you are no longer afraid of it. And once that fear loosens its grip, the rest of your life begins to reorganize itself around a new center, one that no longer needs to hide. At some point, the addiction stops feeling safe because the cost becomes visible. You start noticing how often you shrink before life even tests you, how often you disappear before anyone asks you to show up. This is not coincidence. It is conditioning. Your nervous system learned that staying unseen felt like survival. Carl Jung would say, the psyche adapts to avoid pain, not to reach truth. So it built a habit, a ritual, of self-reduction. You dress down. to lower expectations. You slouch to avoid confrontation. You neglect details so no one looks too closely. This is not laziness. It is strategy, an unconscious agreement with the shadow. If I don't look powerful, I won't be required to act powerful. But here is the fracture. Every strategy that once protected you eventually imprisons you. The body keeps score. The mirror starts asking questions you no longer want to answer. Why do I feel invisible, even when I'm present? Why do I feel tired before the day begins? Why do people overlook me, even when I'm capable? Jung warned, what remains unconscious controls your life, and you call it fate. Your appearance has been writing your fate quietly, day after day, signal after signal. Your posture, teaching your psyche that you are smaller. Your grooming, teaching your mind that effort is pointless. Your reflection, confirming an identity you never consciously chose. And one day, the addiction cracks because the pain of staying the same becomes heavier than the fear of changing. This is the moment most people miss. They feel the discomfort, but misinterpret it. They think, I need motivation. No, you are experiencing identity withdrawal. The old self is losing control, and it will fight back. It will whisper, this isn't you. This is fake. You're trying too hard. Jung would recognize this instantly. The shadow always mocks what threatens its dominance. Because if you change how you appear, you change the story. And if the story changes, the ego loses its hiding place. Here is the truth. Your appearance has never been neutral. It has either reinforced your limitations or challenged them. Nothing in between. When you begin caring again, intentionally, consistently, the psyche panics because coherence demands action. If you look disciplined, you must live disciplined. If you look grounded, you must speak honestly. If you look awake, you can no longer sleepwalk through life. This is why the addiction collapses here. You can't unsee alignment. Once you feel what it's like to respect yourself visually, going back feels worse than never starting. Your nervous system recalibrates. You walk slower, but stronger. You speak less, but clearer. You tolerate less chaos, not because you're superior, but because your inner order has found an outer form. Jung believed individuation begins when the inner image demands embodiment, and embodiment is terrifying because now your life must rise to meet you. The mirror no longer lies. It becomes a contract, a reminder that you are no longer negotiating with the lowest version of yourself. This is where power stabilizes. Not loud, not aggressive, quiet, rooted, unavoidable. And once you reach this point, you don't need motivation. You have crossed the line where self-neglect no longer feels comfortable, and the addiction loses its grip. At this stage, something irreversible has happened. You no longer ask, do I deserve to take care of myself? You ask, how did I ever tolerate less? This is not ego. This is integration. Carl Jung called this moment the return of authority, not authority over others, but authority over the self. Because once your inner image and outer form stop contradicting each other, energy stops leaking. You feel it. Decisions become cleaner. Boundaries require fewer words. Your presence does the talking before your mouth ever opens. This is why appearance was never the problem. Disconnection was. You were never addicted to looking good. You were addicted to avoiding the responsibility that comes with alignment. Because alignment changes everything. When you look coherent, life expects coherence. When you look awake, you can't pretend anymore. This is where many people retreat. They downgrade again to feel safe. But you didn't come this far to go back to numbness. You came here to live embodied, to let your body, your posture, your image declare what your mouth no longer needs to explain. Jung believed the self becomes real only when lived, not when understood, not when imagined, but when expressed daily, quietly, consistently. This is the final shift. Your appearance is no longer a performance. It becomes a standard, a silent promise you keep, even when no one is watching, especially then, because the unconscious is always watching. And now, it finally trusts you. So tomorrow morning, when you face the mirror, do not ask, "Do I look good?" Ask, "Do I look aligned with who I am becoming?" If the answer is no, change something, not out of shame, out of respect. That one act, repeated daily, is how identities are rewritten. This channel exists for moments like this, for people who feel the inner shift, but haven't fully embodied it yet. If this spoke to you, it's because your psyche recognized itself. Subscribe, not for motivation, but for integration. Stay, not to consume, but to apply. And if you're ready to stop negotiating with the version of you that keeps shrinking, then carry this with you. Your appearance is not vanity. It is the visible edge of your self-respect. And once you live from that place, life stops testing you because you finally showed up as someone worth responding to.